Hello there, welcome, and welcome to another brand new show here on the. I'm going to stop doing that voice now. Welcome to a brand new show here on the Silver Screen Podcast. This is hopefully going to be the first in a recurring series that I have decided to launch. Just an idea that's come to me, and it's basically a sort of spin off of. The Silver Screen Podcast, in the same way as the now wildly successful Cult Classics has spun off and now has its own day and is going from strength to strength, which you love to see. So yeah, this basically is my idea of a similar thing, which is rather than Cult Classics, to look at cinema classics, because we spend our time looking at more modern films and films that are related to things that are coming out in cinemas. And yeah, it felt like we were neglecting a lot of the classics. So my thought was, we're going to look at, in this series, at cinema classics, which basically means any film released from the birth of cinema to around 1979. And it'll perhaps be a little bit more academic than you're used to from the reviews and stuff of the other two, the Silver Screen and the Cult Classics podcasts, with the sort of view as to why the film is popular, why it's regarded as a classic, as well as giving our own 2 cents as we review it, and chipping in what we think about it, and obviously giving our usual scores at the end and our thoughts on the film, favorite characters, etc. You know, all that good stuff that you probably will be used to if you're a regular viewer / listener to the podcast. So because this is a sort of soft launch of a whole new thing, we don't really have a guest as such here, but I am thankfully joined by my usual regular co-host DK. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, he is looking at you, kid.
People are going to start to wonder about our relationship, seeing as you've put Ilsa and I've got Rick up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could have been worse. You could have been Victor. At least you sent me off with a different guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you here. Thanks for helping me to launch this, DK. We do have guests coming up, by the way, audience, in future episodes, if and when they do happen, which I'm hoping to. I've got plans for it, and unless this fails in spectacular fashion, we'll be seeing some more. And I'm looking forward to kind of doing it, because being an ex-film studies student, I do enjoy looking at the classic cinema, and there's a lot of my favorites that, like I said, we didn't previously get a chance to talk about on the podcast that we can hopefully maybe look into with a bit more depth. So, as you will have guessed by our conversations and the various things on screen, the film that we're looking at today is going to be Casablanca, the classic film from, I believe, 1942 was the release year. And we will look at that. But first of all, in an idea that I have brazenly stolen from my co-host, DK, I'm going to come to you before we start talking about anything specific and get into Casablanca and say, with the provisos that I've given as regards cinema classics, do you have a favorite cinema classic? I think I might know, because you may have already let slip to me in private, but just curious, what would you say is your favorite classic cinema movie?
There's quite a few, but I'm going to go for what I now call Old Faithful. It's something that it's become a tradition. Every year we watch it around Halloween, and I love Capra's Arsenic and Old Lace.
That's what I was thinking you were going to say.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's a film I haven't seen, but it's from the era of those that I tend to love if I do watch them fresh. So certainly looking forward to catching that at some point. So, yeah, I'll take your recommendation. I won't give my own. It would seem a bit biased, but suffice to say, if we're covering it in the Cinema Classics here or upcoming episodes, I probably love it, and you'll see from the reviews that I'm going to give. So yeah, right. And with that out of the way, I'm going to jump straight into our review. Review and general kind of explanations and bits and pieces about Casablanca. I have got a script and everything ready for this episode, so hopefully it won't sound too stilted. I'm going to try and keep it conversational, but I'm learning as I go. As I say, this is the first episode, so if you like or dislike anything, feel free to chime in the comments or on social media. Let me know what you would like to see, what you don't think might be working as well, etc. So yeah, as I say, we are looking.
Get rid of that co-host.
No, I need the backup. That's not happening. So that's what you're going to say. No, I need the safety net. So yeah, anyway, just jumping in then. I have bits and pieces that I'm going to go as we kind of look at the individual sections, which we do in our reviews. As I say, we keep it quite loose. I broke my note into sections that we normally do, like writing, plot, directing, VFX, if necessary, music and sound, etc. And I've got notes kind of in facts and figures rather than dumping them all at once to kind of chime in with on those. And again, like the regular Silver Screen podcast, if the conversation goes a different way, don't have to stick rigidly to the notes or to the categories. But before that, I will start with a little bit of an introduction because, not everyone, weirdly enough, has even seen this film as I was discussing it with people offline and various potential guests and stuff. So let me just say that Casablanca is a timeless classic set against the backdrop of World War II. Excuse me. It focuses on an American expatriate who must choose between his love for an old flame and helping her husband, a Czechoslovak resistance leader, escape from the Vichy-controlled city of Casablanca to continue his fight against the Germans. Released in 1942, I was right, during the height of the war, this iconic film, directed by Michael Curtiz, unfolds in the exotic city of Casablanca, where complex characters navigate love, sacrifice, and political intrigue. Starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, the film weaves a tale of romance and moral dilemmas, leaving an indelible mark on cinematic history with its unforgettable dialogue and memorable scenes. The story originated from a play titled Everybody Comes to Rick's, written by Murray Burnett and Joan Allison. The play was never produced on Broadway, but Warner Brothers purchased the rights to it in 1942, back when they used to actually make movies. The studio then adapted the story into the legendary film we know today. The screenplay underwent various revisions during production, with contributions from multiple writers, including Julius J. Epstein, Philip G. Epstein, and Howard Koch. Despite the challenges and uncertainties during its creation, Casablanca emerged as a cinematic classic, showcasing the collaborative efforts of talented individuals in the Hollywood industry. The film won 3 Academy Awards in 1944, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. The movie reflects the wartime political climate, addressing themes of sacrifice and resistance against the backdrop of Nazi-occupied Europe. Although it wasn't initially expected to be a success, the film has become so iconic that a few notes of the featured song As Time Goes By now form part of Warner Brothers' introductory studio logo, which you'll have probably heard, I'm sure. Casablanca is available on multiple formats from VHS to 4K. It is included as part of a 4K box set of 5 classic Warner Brothers movies, or in the UK as a 3-disc 4K Blu-ray steelbook, loaded with extras including a full-length documentary about the history of Warner Brothers and a bunch of goodies like postcards, lobby cards, and a reproduction of the full original press booklet, which I can thoroughly recommend, as yes, I do own it. So, but suffice to say, it's available in multiple other ways. I think I've got it on DVD somewhere hidden away, and I have Blu-rays and 4Ks of it in these formats, and yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of people potentially listening who probably have it still on old videotape and whatnot. Hopefully not the colorized Ted Turner version, though, which I'll jump into and just talk briefly about that, because there's a couple of controversies I wanted to mention before we get into the discussing the film, which I just thought were interesting and worth noting. And you may know about them, DK, you may not, so let's see.
Okay.
Casablanca was part of the film colorization controversy of the 1980s when a colorized version aired on the TV network WTBS. In 1984, MGM United Artists hired Color Systems Technology to colorize the film for $180,000. When Ted Turner of Turner Broadcasting System purchased MGM UA's film library 2 years later, he cancelled the request before contracting American Film Technologies in 1988. AFT completed the colorization in 2 months at a cost of $450,000. Turner later reacted to criticism of the colorization, saying, "Casablanca is one of a handful of films that really doesn't have to be colorized. I did it because I wanted to. All I'm trying to do is protect my investment." The Library of Congress deemed that the color change differed so much from the original film that it gave a new copyright to Turner Entertainment. When the colorized film debuted on WTBS, it was watched by 3 million viewers, not making the top 10 viewed cable shows for the week. Although Jack Matthews of the LA Times called the finished product state of the art, it was mostly met with negative critical reception. It was briefly available on home video. Gary Edgerton, writing for the Journal of Popular Film and Television, criticized the colorization, stating that Casablanca in color ended up being much blander in appearance and overall much less visually interesting than its 1942 predecessor. And Humphrey Bogart's son Stephen said, "If you're going to colorize Casablanca, why not put arms on the Venus de Milo?" So Russell T Davies and producers of Doctor Who, take note. I will say about that. And the second controversy, when the award was announced for Best Picture, which Casablanca won, the producer Hal B. Wallace got up to accept it, but studio head Jack L. Warner rushed up to the stage, quote, "with a broad flashing smile and a look of great self-satisfaction," unquote. Wallace later recalled, "I couldn't believe it was happening. Casablanca had been my creation. Jack had absolutely nothing to do with it. As the audience gasped, I tried to get out of the row of seats and into the aisle, but the entire Warner family sat blocking me. I had no alternative but to sit down again, humiliated and furious. Almost 40 years later, I still haven't recovered from the shock." And this incident led Wallace to leave Warner Brothers in April of that year. So, yeah, Warner Brothers not great, it turns out, historically.
The more things change.
Mm-hmm. The more they stay the same, indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah. Before I jump into anything else and sort of look at the breakdown of the film DK, as we normally do, I'm going to ask if you can recall the first time that you saw Casablanca. What was your first experience of it, and maybe what was your initial impressions of the film?
Okay, I'm gonna really disappoint you here. This, no, seriously, this is the first time I've been able to sit through the entire thing.
Okay.
I'm going back several years now. I did own this. I was one of the people that did own this on VHS. I worked for an unnamed. I will not mention the name. Famous or used to be famous high street stationer chain in the UK. And make of that what you will. You know who I'm talking about, Mike.
Oh,
And
yes.
they were having a sale, and I managed to pick up a collector's edition of the VHS. I'm not sure if you remember it. It was a huge black box set, and it had the movie in with a tape, and it had a beautifully illustrated hardback book along with it.
Okay.
And I picked that up, and yeah, I got it home. I believe I started watching. I'd watched the first 10 minutes, and then I got called to do something because I was in a house share at that time, and that was it. That was that was as far as I got. I never got back to it. The box set remained in a wardrobe somewhere. I think in order to keep it safe, I gave it to my parents, and they put it in a wardrobe somewhere, and that's the last I remember seeing of it. No idea what happened to it, but yeah,
Wow.
I am sad at the fact that I've lost it. So
Yeah.
yes, flash forward, at least I would imagine 20 years, and yeah, it came up for this, and as Mike will no doubt confirm, I had a hell of a time finding this.
Yes.
It's not easy to get hold of on
It's not
such
easy to
short
stream.
notice.
It's easy enough to buy, but it's not easy to stream.
Yes, and yeah, so in what is no doubt a disappointment for you and any other cinephiles that are listening to this is actually the first time I've watched
Wow.
this through.
Well, at least you have watched it. Like I said, several of our potential guests and the people in our Discord have never even seen the film, which is a shock to me because it is so kind of iconic. And I mean, I'll be using that word a lot, but it really does apply here. I mean, I was talking to Adrienne on our Discord, who's often a guest on the podcast, and she said, "Oh, she wants to watch it and she's going to give it a go, but she has never seen it before." And I says, "You'll probably feel like you have seen it because it's been referenced in hundreds of other places, so it's
Exactly.
kind of known
I'll
here."
tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it is. My experience, and I presume I'm not going to presume to talk to everybody, but I will presume for a great number of people that because it is referenced, because the lines are so iconic, because some of the scenes are so iconic, and as you say, the music as time goes by, we've all been exposed to so many clips and so many quotes over the years that you feel like you've seen it, even if you haven't seen it. So when it comes time to actually, for an example like this, and you say, okay, we're going to look at this movie, you suddenly think, crap, I really haven't seen it. Whereas for the most part, in your mind's eye, you automatically, when someone mentions Casablanca, you go, oh yeah, that iconic, fantastic film. I know it by heart, and you've never seen it. And I'll
There's
be
definitely people
complete.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be completely honest with you. The closest I came to seeing this is watching the Red Dwarf episode Camille.
I actually looked that episode up because it put me in mind of it, and it is
Yeah,
surprising how close the dialogue at the end of that episode is. As well.
we'll always have parrots.
The problems of two blobs and a droid don't mean a hill of beans in the crazy universe.
Yes.
Oh, I love Red Dwarf. Yeah, but I was going to say, I mean, it's been referenced not only in everything from like Red Dwarf to Animaniacs, but there was a video I found on YouTube that I ended up going down the rabbit hole and watching, and it was like 25 minutes worth of references just from other movies. And there was like a couple of Woody Allen films. There was When Harry Met Sally. There was a few even like Korean movies and stuff that referenced. And then La La Land obviously has a few sly references to it and stuff. And it's like, it is part of our cultural identity and our zeitgeist, even if you haven't seen it. Like I said, you'll probably get the sense that you have, and I do implore you to give it a look if you haven't, because there's a familiarity to it, perhaps, that you might sort of think, oh, I've seen it all before, but there is bits in it that I think you will appreciate, even if you've seen a lot of it in passing.
Without giving too much away of my thoughts on the movie, it was not what I expected. Having had that kind of situation foisted on you, where you do think, oh, I know this.
Yeah.
When I sat down and watched it, I suddenly realized I really didn't know this at all.
Yeah, that's fair. That's hopefully going to be the idea of kind of examining it and maybe awakening a few other people to the fact that, you might not actually know it or even remember it all as well as you think you do. Because just to give you sort of some background about my experience, I bought Casablanca on DVD from a different high street chain than the one you referenced, just because it happened to be on sale, because, the older movies tend not to be as popular. So it was on sale for a few quid and I picked it up thinking I'll have it in my collection. Never got around to watching it. And then one Christmas Eve, about, 10 years ago, maybe, it was on TV. And I was like, oh, I'll watch this because, we're not doing anything. We're getting ready for Christmas and everybody was either asleep or elsewhere. So I sat down and watched the full thing. And then there was a documentary about the making of it and the key scenes that came on immediately afterwards. And so I ended up staying up till, past midnight on that particular Christmas Eve, just weirdly obsessed with Casablanca since I'd actually sat down and watched it and was like, that's actually really good. And I enjoyed the bits and pieces, but I have to say, even then, like I'd watched it then, and then I watched the DVD again to get myself kind of like, oh, was it as good? Yeah, it was very good. And as I say, I've watched the a Blu-ray that I had of it, and now I've watched it on the 4K that I've twice actually on 4K, once on the Steelbook set, once on the other set that I've got. And yet there is still things that come to me that I've either forgotten or just didn't register with me the first time I watched it. It's one of those films that you hear, it's a cliche, but you kind of notice new things about it and new layers every time you watch it, or I do anyway. And I really appreciate it for that. And I will say the first time I watched it, there was almost nothing that stuck with me other than a few of the key iconic moments that we'll talk about, which is, there's a couple of major things towards the end that it's hard not to have registered in your brain, but there's so much more. And I'll talk about it when we get to it, but yeah. And again, I won't spoil my thoughts about it because we'll get to that at the very end of the movie, or of the review. Sorry. So, but yeah, how did you find the experience of watching it? Because I will say it's a rarity, because I think it's an hour and 40 minutes long as well, which for today's sort of moviegoer is practically brisk.
Yeah, it's almost like watching a Looney Tunes short, although not as wacky, obviously. Yeah, it was surprising, and it's surprising to me how much that they managed to fit into such a, as you say, what for modern audiences is a short runtime.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Looney Tunes, by the way, one of the features that are on the various versions is a Bugs Bunny cartoon called Carrot Blanca, which also uses very slightly adapted versions of almost the exact dialogue. So if you've seen that, you may also think that you've seen the film.
It's very odd, because apart from this and the aforementioned Arsenic and Old Lace, the only time I'd really experienced Peter Lorre was in Looney Tunes cartoons.
All right. Remind me again, Peter Lorre, who plays in this film?
I can't. Ugart?
Ugart. That's what I thought.
Ugart,
That's what I thought. That was one of the clips from the Woody Allen film. I forget which film it was, but Woody Allen's character says, "Oh, I love to believe that I'm Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca. I'm actually Peter Lorre." And I was like, "Oof, relatable."
Yeah.
So yeah, not a fan of Woody Allen as a person, but occasionally he does write some very on the nose dialogue. So yeah, fair enough. So what we'll do then, I'm going to jump straight into the first section here that I've got written down, which would be the acting, just because it's the first thing I've got. I have a couple of things just about the main actors that I want to kind of let be known, and then we can talk about our thoughts on the acting, if that's okay with you, DK.
Yeah, that's fine, mate.
So first of all, Humphrey Bogart's iconic line, "Here's looking at you, kid," is said 4 times in the movie, but was not in the draft screenplays at all. It has been attributed to a comment that he made to Bergman as she played poker with her English coach and hairdresser in between takes. So that was entirely Bogey's contribution to the movie, and again, now has become iconic, I guess. So, yeah. Ingrid Bergman's portrayal of Ilsa Lund in Casablanca became one of her best-known roles. In later years, she said, "I feel about Casablanca that it has a life of its own. There's something mystical about it. It seems to have filled a need that was there before the film." So yeah, what are your thoughts on the acting? Starting obviously with I suppose the main trio would be where you should start, because they're always the ones that are credited and mentioned first. So the aforementioned Bogbart, Bergman, and is it Paul Henreid who plays I think Laszlo in the movie?
Yeah, I'm showing so many gaps in my my film knowledge here, but I am not kidding. This was also the first Bogart film that I've seen,
Right.
and
It may be the only one I've ever seen.
oh, okay, I'm among good company now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to break it down into categories for me without giving my thoughts of the entire thing away. But I am going to
Okay.
say that Bogart was a revelation. Obviously, he's as iconic as the movie is, and he's always held up as one of those, those classics from Maltese Falcon and is it The Big Sleep and that kind of thing. But I'd never actually seen him in African Queen. I'd never seen him in a movie. Never seen him in a movie until this. And he deserves every bit of his reputation.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's we have an image of him because that was the era where movie stars had cultivated images, and we think of him, even if we haven't seen the movies, of this man's man, this kind of gravel voiced, smoking. Everyone does an impression. Hey kid, I'm gonna be, and yet there's several moments in this where he displays a surprising vulnerability. Like he gets genuinely emotional and really kind of breaks your heart. And I was like, for a man's man actor in the 1940s, that is huge.
There is a surprising number of levels, and it's not just to Rick's character, to a lot of the characters in this. And I was completely shocked. I mean, I don't want to be facile about it, but as a modern moviegoer, you tend to look back on movies from this period and before as kind of primitive almost, like they don't have the subtext that you get in movies these days, like they don't have anywhere near character development that you do. And so wrong, so wrong.
Yeah.
I was just blown away by his portrayal, mind you, not just him, pretty much everyone in this. And I'm not going to go any further because, as I say, we'll get to it. But yeah, I think his portrayal was fantastic. Bergman, she had I'm not just going to say a vulnerability, because she wasn't just there as a damsel in distress. She had, but again, with the quotes that you've heard, the clips that you've seen, that's all you expect her to be. So when you see her in certain scenes in this, she's just fantastic. And for some reason, again, going on to Laszlo with regards to the clips, for some reason I got it into my head, and maybe it's Camille again, that Laszlo only showed up towards the end of the movie. It's just so to find that he's there, he's right in the thick of things all the way through. And what's the actor's name again? Sorry,
Paul Henreid. I believe, probably pronouncing it wrong, but I think that's my best attempt.
he's so good. He's so good. That's to me, that he's as much, and I'm sure some people will say that's sacrilege. He's as much a leading man as Bogart in this. I was completely taken by surprise by that. And some of the most iconic moments are given to Victor Laszlo. And
completely agree.
I just can't fault any of them.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying before, it's surprising because you think of films perhaps from this era as being a bit basic, and yet it's films that you may be used to from like the 90s and onwards, where there's a love triangle where it feels like the heroes have to be heroic and the awkward guy that's in the way has to have the audience rooting against them. And this film doesn't even give you that comfort, because Laszlo is every bit the hero, and it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you may well want Rick and Ilsa to be together, and you may feel their relationship, but you have nothing against Victor Laszlo at all, and quite the opposite. The movie makes you, like, it grabs you by the collar and makes you love him and sort of says, no, this is a good guy. We're not seeing the obvious easy thing of like, oh, she wants to leave her abusive husband for the love of her life. It's literally, she's torn between two equally heroic in different ways men. So,
I mean, if anything, as it goes, Laszlo is the bigger hero out of the two. He's like the in your face type hero. He's, you know, what you would say the Captain America. I'm sorry, I'm you know, we're talking about classic here and I'm using modern terminology, but
I know what you mean though. He's the kind of the Boy Scout hero as opposed to the one with any like moral depth, or because I would argue that Bogart is arguably more heroic because of what he actually has to overcome and the nobility that he has to, the selflessness he has to portray, without getting too heavy into spoilers. But again, it's a different kind of heroism than, because, you know, there are occasions when Rick Blaine is a bit of a bastard. You know, his treatment of women other than Ilsa is not ideal.
No.
You know? But again, that's kind of like the nice thing about that is that, again, for a film in 1942, that lead character actually has an arc. He grows, he changes. We see why he's, you know, so cynical and why he's moody and seems like he, you know, doesn't stick his neck out for anybody, doesn't want to take sides and whatever. And we learn it and we kind of feel, I don't want to say justified, but we understand when we see that it's all basically stemming from his relationship with Ilsa and the kind of the tragedies of all that chiming in with the same time as the war and the invasions and stuff. But by the end of the movie, he has found his place and he has decided to, you know, not only that, he's also pulled another less moral guy into his kind of moral crusade with him. So it's pretty cool. It's lovely, as I said, that I think people will be surprised at Rick Blaine, at Humphrey Bogart's character, because he does have that depth. And he does, he's not straightforward one way or the other, but it's that moral complexity that makes him fascinating to watch. And like I said, he will make you feel that you can understand him, and his emotional levels aren't just, this guy's a jerk because he's moody all the time. There's occasional real moments of, you know, of breaking down. A couple of things that I wanted to note from that was when he kind of breaks down with his head in his hands and kind of cries on the night when he's expecting Ilsa to come back and she doesn't. Basically was surprising. And it's a kind of a line as well, but I kind of love the moment when he's telling Sam to play, you know, as time goes by, and Sam won't, and he's like, oh, if she can take it, I can. Just play it. I'm like, yeah, that's really good, you know.
But that's the thing. When I went into this, my overriding impression that Rick is just going to be all attitude and shadows. And you do get that, don't get me wrong, you do get that. You get so much more, and I think it's done such a disservice to have those aspects played up over the years. Obviously you have, you know, the again, we're using the term iconic, but you have those scenes that in any clip show they play, as you've mentioned, that you played it for her, now play it for me, and the end scene, and you know, you have all that. So when I went in and I saw, you know, the odd clip of him sat at the table, and it's just him and Sam in shadows, I thought, oh, it's just going to be this. I'm subjecting myself to something I'm not going to watch. But he has so much depth to the character, and you just scratch the surface with these clips, and I think if anything, its popularity has undermined what is actually in the film itself.
Yeah, I think it's a case of his celebrity image overtaking what's actually like his work, if you know what I mean. Because like I said, that was the era where the movie stars were, you know, in big bold quotes, movie stars, and they had their image to portray. And the majority of the movies you mentioned that he was in were kind of gangster movies, or, you know, things where he had to play a hard nut character, or just be pure tough. And so that was kind of the image that he'd cultivated. But as you said, I think this film shows that he has got a lot more range than that. I mean, he actually does really good drunk acting, which is never easy for anybody, by the way.
He doesn't, you know, he doesn't do the typical, you know, who came later, Dudley Moore, staggering, slurring speech kind of thing, which Dudley Moore did fantastic with, don't get me wrong, but he does play a very good person. He does play overly imbibed well.
Yes, and like I said, it's believable. It's not over the top. It's just kind of like you feel for him. But the other thing I would say, just the last thing on Bogart, would be that in terms of the range, it's amazing that he is, to me, a completely different character in those flashbacks. To the point that the script even uses the different name, like he's Richard, and he even says at one point, "Oh, I'm Richard. I'm back in Paris again now." Is that what it is? When she kind of comes back to him, Richard, not Rick. But it is amazing that he can differentiate so much between those two characters, the kind of happy, in love version of Richard, and then the sort of cynical, world weary Rick. It's a great performance.
It is. It's like night and day, and it's almost. I mean, you can see kind of the scene at the train station where he does kind of become Rick rather than Richard, and it's certainly had a depth of emotion that I never expected.
Absolutely, even to the point where he clearly regrets, like when he's he's doing his character, this kind of Rick thing that he's cultivated, and he effectively calls Ilsa a whore, more or less. Like, you're not one of the kind of women that tells, and then you can just tell he immediately regrets it and wishes he hadn't said that thing. And that that was another final push for her, because as you said, she's not a damsel in distress. She doesn't just sit there and take it. She's like, no, that was hurtful. I had an explanation for you. Now you don't get it. You know what I mean? Because you don't deserve it at this point anymore. It's like, okay, I kind of like that this woman stands up for herself. There will be complaints, I'm sure, from people who say that she kind of doesn't have any agency in the final decision, which I kind of disagree with, because it's a tricky area, but I feel like it's kind of hard to give her and Rick both agency in that moment. But I'd like to see it personally as they're both making that decision rather than just one of them. And ultimately we could talk about it when we talk about the ending, but that's a different matter for a different moment. And but in terms of Bergman, because we're talking about her now, I will say, like you said, she's just got such a screen presence. It doesn't hurt that she is, if I do say so myself, absolutely stunningly beautiful. So, and the director and the kind of camera people all know this. So there are several shots where it's just her face in close up, and they're all stunning. She absolutely is, like, holding that screen, and you just look and think, this is an old fashioned movie star beauty. It's kind of, I fully believe it, and I can believe how Rick and even Laszlo would fall for this woman.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, there's depth to that performance as well, like you said, from the flashback to the kind of, she has to portray this difficult, tragic, I'm in love with two men and I don't like one more than the other, and now this is my predicament. And again, it could have devolved into cliche, it could have been hokey, and it never is. I think you really do, or I personally really feel the actual pull of both sides from her, and the actual not knowing what to do one way or the other, and the actual, you get the sense she is being torn apart, to not knowing what decision to make, and outside factors influencing that one way or the other as well. So
yeah, I as you say, you think it's, and again, because this is kind of the movie that launched all these I'm not going to homages, iterations, straight up rip-offs of it. And basically, where all these iterations fall down is they do fall into the traps of making all these characters tropes. So when you go into this, the one that kind of kicked it all off, you expect that from this. And it completely pulls the ground from under you, because it's not like that at all.
Yeah. And just before, again, my last word on Bergman is, again, it's just to praise the film. So sorry, everybody, if you're sick of it. But just, again, it would have been easy to have her kind of leaving Rick in the flashback be a moment where the audience can go, oh, yeah, that bitch. But she actually plays that tragedy of it really incredibly well. Like, you can see it's tearing her apart inside, and she's really, really not happy about this. And even though it turns Rick, the character, like, deeply cynical, I don't think the audience could feasibly have that attitude, because I don't think she's portraying at all that kind of, it was an easy choice, if that makes sense.
You actually see these characters as real people, and I think our problem is these days a lot of cinematic entertainment, unless you go into indie, I don't think a lot of characterization treats people as real people at the moment.
Yeah, you're probably right. So yeah, any thoughts then quickly on Laszlo of the third part of this kind of triangle that we haven't mentioned as yet?
as I say, I wasn't expecting again the depth of character that we got from him. I was just expecting some kind of cipher to show up towards the end and be all selfless and heroic, and naturally he is. But he under this, you can tell there's a lot going on underneath the surface that he could be as I'm going to say as erratic as any of us, but he has to keep himself in check. And this guy's been through a lot, and yet, she still kind of has that hold over him. And I think this isn't there a line later on in the movie where I forgot it now, but where they bring up just how much she means to him.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah.
It goes back to that last line. There's a part in there where, Rick even says, you're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. So she is that level of importance,
Yeah, but until I'd actually experienced the movie for itself, I just thought it was a line. You know how people use a line just to get rid of someone, and you just think, okay. But
Yeah,
you feel it for Laszlo in this. And it's something I'd never expected to do.
Yeah. I can't really add much else except to say that I love, like I said, that the film is brave enough to let him be a hero and not be portrayed as either too dumb to realize, because Rick even comes clean at the very end about everything that's happened. And, even if he spins a lie, I think, the undercurrent there is that they know what's going on.
Oh, yeah, he definitely knows, because he does that scene in the bar later where he says, that you're in love with my wife and stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, like at the very end when, Rick says, oh, I wanted to believe it, but it was all a lie, and, blah, blah, blah. And I don't personally think Laszlo buys that for a second, but I think he can see that this is Rick's chance to be noble and gives him that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But again, that's not really made explicit. That's just in the kind of acting and the hints and the writing and stuff. So, but it saves Laszlo from looking like an idiot, which I think would have been a real risk for a character that's been, like I said, the movie's brave enough to portray him just as a pure hero, and all of his moments that I've got that like stand out for me are of him doing that, because he is, like you said, he's running from the Nazis, he's escaped the concentration camp, and there's two key things. The first one is when he's being questioned by, I forget the German guy's name now.
Strasser.
That's right, Strasser. He's in the the actual cop officer, whatever you want to call it, in Casablanca, being questioned by Strasser, and he just literally, just without any fear, just brazenly knocks him, like, oh, you can try whatever you like, but there are people that are going to fight back, and there's not enough of you Nazis to really make an impact when people start rising up, and you're going to know about it. It's just like you just want to sort of do that punch the air thing, like, yeah, show him, man. And then similarly, which I'll talk about at more length probably later, because I have a bit about it, when he leads the kind of dual anthems in the bar, which is such a good scene.
I love that.
Yeah. Oh, completely. Yeah. I have got a bit about it, so I will talk about it when we get there. But yeah. So yeah, other than that, is there anyone else in the acting that you, because obviously we've got let's see, Sydney Greenstreet playing Ferrari. It's not much of a role, but he's in there.
Yeah. I again, they're all morally dubious, and they're all, but it's a question of necessity. They're not morally dubious for the sake of being more. Well, let's not go into Renault for the moment. There are some.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I was going to say that's a bit iffy by today's standards, and certainly what's implied.
Yeah. But you get the feeling that the majority of the decisions they're making, it's just out of necessity. Everybody's here is just trying their best to survive in a world that has just gone mad.
Yeah, completely. And you already mentioned Peter Lorre, but yeah, the sort of the tragic lucklessness of that character, who again isn't really in the film that long, but boy, you feel his impact, and when you hear what's happened to him off screen, even, you're just kind of like, oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would, for some reason, again, and it could just be down to the fact that I knew he was in it and not experiencing it. I was under the impression that he was in the movie a lot longer than he actually is. So, just for that short period, he certainly made his mark. I understand this. I could be wrong. I understand this was his first big theatrical role.
I think so. I couldn't swear to it, but I think so.
Yeah, because I think he went from this to again Arsenic and Old Lace. So
Okay, fair enough. So you know his work quite well. Cool. So any other thoughts on the acting, or should I jump straight to the writing that I've got bits and pieces about here?
I just think that there's not, you know, we say it so often, it's kind of lost all meaning, but there's not one role here, I think, that lets the side down from the main characters. And obviously, you know, you've got Louis Strasser. Strasser, occasionally I get hints of Hello from. I'm not going to lie. But I still think
when I explain what that actor kind of the way that he's approaching that role and the kind of unfairness of it, I think you'll appreciate it a little bit more.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is that just because of his accent, he was constantly getting cast as Nazis, and yet he was, you know, fiercely anti that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think he is kind of like it's not the most believable performance because he doesn't believe it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I do like Ferrari. I mean, as you say, he's not in that great a deal. But even down to the minor players, and you know, I'm specifically thinking about that couple, the young couple.
I was just going to say, I'm terrible with names, but like the couple that Rick helps out, which is such a great moment, or the woman who sort of really belts out the French, the La Marseillaise anthem.
Yeah.
Gets given a moment of focus. She's really good in like a 2-minute appearance.
Yeah, they get very minor little scenes later on. I mean, obviously they're there in the introduction as they're you know, building the background and the world building, but later on you see them, and even just for small scenes, they really make an impact. And the guy from the couple, obviously there's, you know, the turmoil with the young lady from the couple, and we know what's going to go on, and I presume you're going to go into that later. But the guy from the couple, just from the way he sat at the gambling table and he's losing money, and they're just so good. They're just so good. I was blown away.
Absolutely. Couple of things that have just sprung to mind. First of all, we'd forgot to mention Dooley Wilson, who plays Sam, who is outstanding. Like, he acts incredibly well and sings even better than that, which is incredible. And again, these sort of jazz standards and everything, he plays like Knock on Wood, or I've completely forgotten, but he plays like a really memorable, like a well-known song at the start when he's first introduced as well.
Is that It Had to Be You?
It Had to Be You, that's the one. And then obviously as time goes by, and I think there's an argument that he's the actual beating heart of the film, really, because
I was going to mention he is as much in a way of a hero as Rick and Victor, because he sits there and plays the piano, but he's so protective of Rick, and he really kind of goes out of his way, even to the point where he suggests to Rick that they pack up and go somewhere just to avoid the entanglement with Ilsa, because he can see what's coming a mile down, and he's just doing his very best to protect Rick. Even, you know, Ferrari's offering him a lot more money to go.
I haven't got time to spend the money I make now.
Exactly. It's he's such a great character.
There's also that great moment where he's the only one that stands up to Ilsa, where he literally says to her, just leave. You're no good for him. So I'm just kind of like, as you say, you get the sense that he and Rick really genuinely have that bond. And I know it's a small thing and it should be sort of, you know, should be taken for granted perhaps, but I did appreciate when Ferrari's trying to like buy Sam for the bar, and Rick just gives you that little quick line about like, I don't trade in buying and selling the lives of people. You know? And I was like, for a you know, a white guy talking about a black guy in 1942, that's still dangerously close to areas where some might have been. So I appreciate that little kind of.
I would imagine it still is in certain areas. Well, so yeah,
potentially. So yeah, it was just nice to know that relationship isn't based on kind of, it's not a slave master thing. They're actually genuine like brothers and friends.
Yeah, so,
yeah. All the other thing I was going to say is, in terms of, we've mentioned the dramatic performances and everything, but there's a beautiful comedic moment. And I forgot the actor's name, but the guy who plays Renault, when he has to think of a reason to, you know what I'm going to say, he has to think of a reason to shut
Yes.
down the Rick's. And he
I
goes, I'm
love that.
shocked to find gambling happening on these premises. And the guy just walks out, you're winning, sir. Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I love that.
It's comedy genius. It's all timing, and it's just I laugh my ass off every time.
Yes, I can understand that. That really threw me for a loop. I was kind of creased up at that. And then feeling a little guilty whether I should actually crease up at that with everything else that's going on. But yeah, God help me, I love that bit.
Oh, it's funny though. It is funny. It's played for the laugh. I think it's a little bit of a release in the sort of high tension drama moments.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to jump onto the writing. Yeah, despite the many writers that I mentioned, the film has what Roger Ebert describes as a wonderfully unified and consistent script, which I'd agreed with. Koch later claimed it was the tension between his own approach and Curtis's that had accounted for this. He was one of the screenwriters I mentioned, and the director, obviously. Surprisingly, these disparate approaches meshed, and perhaps it was partly this tug-of-war between Curtis and me that gave the film a certain balance. The other writer, Julius Epstein, noted the screenplay contained, and I quote, more corn than in the states of Kansas and Iowa combined, but when corn works, there's nothing better. Kind of related to what you were saying earlier, the film ran into some trouble with Joseph Breen of the Production Code Administration, the Hollywood self-censorship body, who opposed the suggestion that Captain Renault extorted sexual favors from visa applicants, but also didn't like the implication that Rick and Ilsa had slept together. Not really comparable, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah. This is one of those sort of annoying things that probably comes up in pub trivia nights too much, but yeah, a line closely associated with Casablanca, play it again, Sam, is not actually spoken in the film. It's kind of, you know, Luke, I am your father, or beam me up, Scotty. It's one of those supposedly famous phrases that doesn't actually happen. When Ilsa first enters the Cafe Americain, she spots Sam and asks him, play it once, Sam, for old time's sake. When he feigns ignorance, she responds, play it, Sam, play as time goes by. And later that night, alone with Sam, Rick says, you played it for her, you can play it for me, as we mentioned. And if she can stand it, I can play it. Yeah, that's the two kind of fast facts that I had about it. So yeah, in terms of the writing, then we've kind of touched on a fair bit about it. But is there anything else that stands out to you that you appreciated or that you wanted to mention?
It might be corny, but I think a lot of the dialogue just sparkles, and it's so rapid fire that it's not until it's in your rearview mirror that you think that was such a good line.
Yeah, as I said, there's one of those things where there's little lines that I notice every time that I come to it that I'd never noticed before. Like at the very start of the movie, when Ugart is kind of, you know, prowling, and there's the guy, again, a little comedy moment that the guy's like, well, look out, everybody's vultures, and he's the pickpocket. And like as the Germans are basically rounding up the suspects or whatever, I think it's Ugart or someone similar they go to and asks, do they know anything? And they just reply, we hear very little and we understand even less.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a beautiful summation of like the way people back at that actual time in history had to kind of turn a blind eye. You know, it's horrible, but it did happen.
Yeah. You know, it's
I do. Sorry.
You have lines like, you know, this gun's pointed right at your heart, and he says that is my least vulnerable spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely. But in terms of like, because we will probably be able to, you know, name loads of quotes and little moments that are great. But in terms of the actual setup of writing, I think it's very good how the exposition's all dealt with at the start of the film by like what looks like a newsreel almost about the actual events of the war and why people go to Casablanca, and then a very quick police report about like, you know, there are stolen things on the go, and the, you know, the Germans are looking to apprehend them, and then the way that Ugart introduces after that the letters of transit that become so focal, and they should always be the audience's focus, and they are, even when they're not like, you know, right in your face. I really appreciate the way that it keeps that going as well. And yeah, I mean, I've kind of in terms of lines, I've also written down here, I love this when this what's his name, Renault was speculating about Rick, which by the way, I love that we never get his actual background. It's still kept a little bit mysterious, everything that happened before Ilsa in Paris. So when what's his name, Renault was saying like, why did you come to Casablanca? Rick responds, I came for the water. It's a desert. I was misinformed.
Yeah. I love that. Can you imagine us in London? If when you get there, ask me. And he says, what about New York? He says, well, there are certain sections of New York, Major, that I wouldn't advise you to try and invade.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. I love that. Like, even though he claims he's not taking sides and he won't stick his neck out, there is occasional moments where he does the heroic thing, like when he's he won't let the German officers into the gambling den, and says, your money's good at the bar, go for it. And so, how dare you? I should be allowed in there just like anyone else. And he goes, you're lucky that you're allowed at the bar. Just go.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, okay, you can stand up for your principles, I guess, if you want to every now and then.
But when you first meet him and he is coming across like this cold-hearted cynic, that line where Ugarte says to him, "You despise me, don't you?" And he says, "If I gave you any thought, I probably would."
Yes, exactly. But again, even like he's obviously no fan of the Nazis, but he also doesn't really appreciate murder. So when he finds out Ugarte's actually killed the guy, and he's like, "Oh, you're right. I now do think very differently of you," or whatever it is like that. Like, oh, okay, you don't like murderers either. Fair play.
Yeah.
But yeah. But then, as I said, it's good that there's that moral complexity, and you're never quite sure because it feeds into the very end of the film when he tells Laszlo, "Ask your wife why you're not getting the letters," and you are, spoiler alert, you are thoroughly convinced he's going to leave with Ilsa until that very last minute, and it's so convincing. Like, even though I know the outcome, I've seen the film like 5 or 6 times, I'm still somehow convinced that he's going to leave with her every time that happens, and I'm kind of like, when the twist occurs and he finally, pulls the gun on Renault and, says, "Oh, this is what's actually going to happen," and sends her on her way, I'm like, oof, that seemed like a close call. But then again, you had that great moment that we've mentioned where he meets the Bulgarian couple or the woman who's kind of willing to do anything to get out of there. And then he basically helps the guy by just effectively, cheating on the roulette wheel to get him the money to escape.
Yeah.
I love that there are moments that show that level of, heart of gold to him as well, because I think he did kind of need that. So how did you feel about all of that?
Definitely. And obviously this is my first time watching it. So even though I knew how it was going to end, because obviously it's one of the clips that's out there, but up until the last
and you'd
minute,
seen Camille.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking, how is this? Because I'm just giving you the reaction how as I was watching it in real time, because I honestly thought he was going to sell Laszlo out. You do get those heart of gold moments, and I'm glad, obviously that one happened. But it was that scene with the couple, with the cheating at the roulette, that made me think, what a guy. Oh, God, I'm going back to Red Dwarf again. But yes, I'm going to be in the office covered in Tara Masalata.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But I won't get into it, but I will say as well, the writing, the ending is just the perfect film ending for me. Never been topped. So that's all I have to say about that. And that's my last note on the writing, unless you have anything else you wanted to add.
I just think it's with any film, the writing is what holds it up, as you've seen when we've looked at certain movies from the modern era. But when you go into this with expectations, and I'll be completely honest with you, as a modern moviegoer, sometimes I go into these things thinking, I'm really not going to enjoy this. So when the plotting and the dialogue hold up to such an extent that you're just loving it and you're not wanting it to end, you just can't really ask for better. And I think this is one of those movies.
That's fair enough. Before I jump into I've got direction lumped with kind of cinematography, production design. I did have a couple of separate sections that I wanted to talk about as their own thing in the writing. And the first one is the kind of famous "We'll always have Paris." Like I said, you'll know that line because it's become so huge. But I do love the way that, it becomes such a focal part of the movie, and the film does dedicate a solid 20 minutes to that important flashback. And even, the emotional impact of it is so felt by when he actually says that line, "We'll always have Paris." We'd lost it, but then we got it back that night. It's one of those great romantic lines that sort of hits me right in the heartstrings.
Yeah.
I love it. And I love the way everything's directed as sort of, when they're in Paris, it's all happiness and light. And then the second that, she doesn't turn up, it's chucking down rain on the Dear John letter, and everything's disastrous, just really great. Did you have any thoughts on that particular part?
I do like that they actually did the flashback and they didn't just try and revert to telling us, not showing us.
Exactly.
But I think it's partially down to the writing and partially down to the direction. That something I never personally expected, and you get it right from the opening with the narration, and it's driven home to such an extent that these are not only are these people living on the edge, but at this point, and I'm sorry to say, it still relates to modern day, that the world itself is on the edge. Situations can change just like that. And you get it in the flashback sequence where they say, "Oh, the Nazis are on their way. They're going to be here in a day," and you then see them coming in with the megaphone and saying that they're coming, they're on the way, and all that kind of stuff. And you really have this feeling throughout of desperation that there are good times out there, but there's this shadow looming over everything. And it's it brought a level of emotion to it that I really wasn't expecting.
It does, because I think for us, because we know that it's real. Do you know what I mean? It's not a fictional approaching enemy. It was something that actually happened. People were cornered in these places like Casablanca trying to escape, and the Nazis did chase them all around the world, and they did invade, and it was awful. There was real life equivalents to Rick, or even more so to Laszlo. And I think a lot of the initial success of the film was attributed to the fact that it was, it was either during or just after the Second World War that people saw it, and because it had that real life representation. I mean, I mentioned that I've got the original press booklet that came with the 4K steelbook, and in the press booklet there are so many pages dedicated to the Free French movements. You've got to plug it to them. You've got to have them have their own screening nights and everything, and it's kind of like, you forget there's a real life thing going on in the backdrop of this movie, So and speaking of which, the other thing that we've mentioned that I wanted to briefly talk about is the duel of the anthem sequence, which is just, it doesn't get nearly enough fame or legendary status, but it's so good compared to the end of the movie anyway. And I will say that much of the emotional impact of the film for the audience, as I said in 42, has been attributed to the large proportion of European exiles and refugees who were either extras or played minor roles, in addition to the leading actors Paul Henreid, Konrad Veidt, and Peter Lorre, such as Louis V. Arco, Trude Berliner, Eike Grunig, Ludwig Stossel, Hans Heinrich von Twardowski, and Wolfgang Zilzer. Don't ask me who they all played, but they were all in there. And a witness to the filming of the duel of the anthem sequence said that he saw many of the actors crying and realized that they were all real refugees. Harmetz argued that they brought to a dozen small roles in Casablanca an understanding and a desperation that could never have come from central casting. Even though many were Jewish or refugees from the Nazis or both, they were frequently cast as Nazis in various war films because of their accents. And I think, that all shines really through in that sequence for me.
It is when he gets up and he tells the band to play Marseillaise, and they all join in, and it is kind of a punch the air moment.
Completely, as they drown out the kind of German national anthem. I love it. I love that scene. It's one of the things. The first time I saw the film, it was a surprise, because like you and like everyone else, there's a lot of I thought, I've seen this bit. I knew the iconic ending and everything, but I wasn't really aware of that scene. And so when that actually happened on my first viewing that Christmas Eve, I was like, wow, this has come from nowhere in this kind of famous romance. What's this about?
Exactly, and it's powerful stuff.
It is,
it's kind of a double-edged sword. You kind of want it to be more well-known, but if it was, when someone comes to the movie, they're not going to be as surprised. So it's a powerful scene.
It is. I love it, and I love the way it's acted and directed and everything. So not much else to say about that. Just it's a brilliant scene. So moving on to, like I said, directing, cinematography, and production design. The cinematographer was Arthur Edison, a veteran who'd previously shot The Maltese Falcon, and Frankenstein. Particular attention was paid to photographing Bergman. I think that shows, personally. She was shot mainly from her preferred left side, often with a softening gauze filter and with catchlights to make her eyes sparkle. The whole effect was designed to make her face seem ineffably sad and tender and nostalgic, which explains why that was the sense I got. Bars of shadow across the characters and in the background variously imply imprisonment, the crucifix, the symbol of the Free French forces, and emotional turmoil. dark film noir and expressionist lighting was used in several scenes, particularly towards the end of the film. Rosenzweig argues these shadow and lighting effects are classic elements of the Curtis style, the director, along with the fluid camera work and the use of the environment as a framing device. The film critic Roger Ebert has called the producer Hal B. Wallace the key creative force because of his attention to details of production, down to apparently insisting on a real parrot for the outside of the Blue Parrot bar.
Oh.
And, yeah, just random facts and things. But I think it says a lot about the directing and the cinematography that I kind of picked up on all that stuff before actually seeing it quantified like that and was like, yes, I get exactly what you mean. I can see that Rick's often in shadow when he's most devastated, and Ilsa's almost always in the light, like this almost angelic figure. And yeah, there's a lot of moody, like you said, film noir lighting and an awful lot of bars of shadow that are implying various things. And I think that's a kind of level of directing that you can get into full analysis mode, but it probably would bore most people. But you can definitely see it.
Yeah, the use of lighting and shadow in this, it's almost a character in itself.
Completely, yeah. And I think personally that's why the colorization just doesn't quite work, because it needs that the way that lighting was for black and white and everything. So you lose that if you colorize a film like this. So I mean, not to be film snobbish about it, but if you do have an option to see either one, please don't watch the colorized version. It's never going to be as good.
I honestly thought I was going to have to revert to the color version. I don't know if you recall.
I do recall, and I thought I'd found it on YouTube.
Yeah, I was like, oh God, no, I don't want it. But if that's all I can get, I'll take it. And see, the weird thing is, I don't know if it's because of the strange setup. I went to Prime. I thought I'm going to watch it on Prime, and came up, search Casablanca. Here it is. It says watch it on Prime. Click Prime. This video is not available in your area. I'm like, you bastards.
Yeah. It'd be like that sometimes. It's one of those weird things, because I think if you have what do you call them, like the classic movies or the Criterion Collection channels and stuff, you can probably get this quite easily, but those aren't the most easily accessed or inexpensive things. And it's not the kind of film that you'd find on like your average Netflix, unfortunately.
No. And this is why people stick to physical media.
Yes. Yeah. 100%, because I would hate a film like this to have ever been lost, you know what I mean? And I will say the 4K, even though it's an old black and white film, it looks sumptuous to look at. It really does. I know I say that a lot, but it's something else. It really does make you feel very involved in the picture when it's so clear. And again,
I will say, when I did see it, I mean, I don't even have the 4K, and the picture was beautiful.
Oh yeah, the director and cinematographer, I think, have done a fantastic job anyway. So it's always going to look good. But when it's fully cleaned up, it's just you can see a difference, even for a film, like I said, made in the 40s. So yeah. Any other thoughts on the direction or anything related to that side of things?
I just love the fact that it, for the majority, it all takes place in one area as such, and the director makes such good use of that space that you never get bored with the surroundings. You don't keep seeing things from the same angles. I just love it that he keeps it visually interesting for the most part.
That's fair enough. Cool. So yeah, anything else then? The last things would be things like VFX, which obviously doesn't really apply here. We've talked about what you could do in the 40s, and there's no need for special effects, but camera effects and things were.
I do like the establishing shot at the start where it shows the plane coming into land over the sign for Rick's Bar. I had no idea that Rick's Bar was in such close proximity to the airport. And I
think the way that they kind of the plane takes over what looks like a model globe and stuff, there was something that's been copied by films so much since.
Oh yeah,
but you don't realize it actually began with Casablanca. That was the first time it had been done,
Yeah, it's So there's not much on the FX side, but what they did, I think it would, just done really well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And the sound and music we kind of have to mention, because as I've mentioned already, Dooley Wilson, the various jazz songs and things are so fantastic. Even though we've mentioned it once, they are, they warrant mentioning again, I think. Would you say the same about that? Or
Definitely. It's such a memorable a memorable soundtrack. And yeah, obviously you only ever hear one musical number in all the clips that you see outside of it, but I did love his rendition of "It Had to Be You," and that song's a big. I'm a big fan of that one. So yeah,
See, I loved "Knock on Wood" as well.
that was good.
So,
That was good.
yeah.
I do like that the entire band joined in on that one.
Yeah, well, everybody was. That's the thing. I think
Yeah,
because it
that's
was so
true.
rousing, like everyone in the bar was going, "Yeah," duh, duh, duh. And that is the one, by the way, that gets referenced in Blanca with I forget which character, Daffy Duck, I think, hammering himself on the head with a sledgehammer to the tune of the doot doot doot, as you would. So yeah, I don't think I've got much else. Oh, in terms of the direction, a couple of very small things that I wanted to bring up. First of all, when it's kind of their last kiss in Paris, and the audience knows and Ilsa knows, but Rick doesn't. And you see the she spills the champagne to signify like the disaster moment. So subtle but very nice. Rick's intro, he gets given the hero intro. It's almost James Bond style when it goes from like the table to the cigarette up his arm, and then it's Rick, the hero of the story.
Oh yeah. It's that very Connery moment, isn't it, from
It really is,
Doctor
yeah.
No?
Yeah, completely. It's yeah, and let's see. Often I've said already, Bogart's in the moody kind of shadow, and yeah. Oh, when Ilsa comes at the very end of the film to, you think, to decide to leave with Rick, she's illuminated in the center of the doorway, and it's very, again, angelic and kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
And just I love that. Like I said, often it will portray Rick, who's the one already dubious, in shadow while she's in the light, and yeah, nothing else to say really. I will say in terms of obviously the music, as time goes by, as we've mentioned, deserves every bit of the sort of plaudits that it gets, and it did lead to a huge surge in popularity for that song, and particularly for Dooley Wilson's version, which ended up, I think, spending ages in the charts after the film came out. But I did notice as well that there's a very cool ongoing leitmotif of the French national anthem that just plays on the background of every kind of sort of patriotic-ish moment.
Yeah, I
well.
picked up on that. That's what a nice little touch, that.
Yeah, cool. So let me go. I think that would be almost everything, except I did want to talk briefly about the ending of the film. So again, if you haven't seen it, spoilers, because I did have a little bit that I found about this, which is to say that the possibility was discussed of Laszlo being killed in Casablanca, which would allow Rick and Ilsa to leave together. But as the critic Casey Robinson wrote to Wallace before filming began, the ending of the film, quote, set up for a swell twist when Rick sends her away on the plane with Laszlo. For now, in doing so, he is not just solving a love triangle, he is forcing the girl to live up to the idealism of her nature, forcing her to carry on with the work that in these days is far more important than the love of two little people. It was certainly impossible for Ilsa to leave Laszlo for Rick because the motion picture production code forbade showing a woman leaving her husband for another man. Yay, the 40s. Yeah, I think the less said about that, the better. But yeah, as I said, that ending is rightfully well known, and I can't fault it. There's nothing else I can say other than, I've seen a lot of movies, and there's yet to be an ending that has the impact that this one does or the effect. I love it, and even down to the last line, which has nothing to do with the bulk of it and the whole. It's just about Rick and Louis. I think it's the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It's just a quality hit you on the nose bit of last line, and when you know that, there's many hands contributing to this script, it is incredible how focused and together and well oiled it all seems. Because
Definitely.
yeah, there was a real chance of too many cooks situation, and yeah, I think it's sheer fluke that it didn't turn out that way.
And not only does it give Rick a nice little, payoff to his character arc, but it gives Renault one too.
Exactly. He also gets the chance to be redeemed, even for some pretty horrendous and heinous things. Because again, it's a nice, there's a few last minute surprises at the end of the film. And I can't really speak to it because I haven't seen it as recently as you, but I think that moment when Renault kind of sees that Rick has shot Strasser and then just says, well, round up the usual suspects, and dumps the symbol of the oppression, as it were, in the bin, and says, well, that 10,000 francs I owe you will just about cover our expenses.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it was such a turnaround because I really hated him. He had some fantastic lines and he made me smile once in a while. But my overriding impression was, my God, this Renault is a shit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when the turnaround at the end, okay, he's still a shit, but he's more my kind of a shit now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's fairly unforgivable, the kind of exploitation of women. But the sad thing is, in the 40s, that probably wouldn't have been as egregious. People
No.
probably would have just looked on it as, no, yeah. I mean, he even refers to it, doesn't he, as, oh, you're interfering with my little romances. And it's kind of like, oh, it's awkward.
Yeah,
But
but the
you
thing
add that
is
to the
that
thing. Sorry, go ahead.
the thing is, it would happen, and it would happen these
Oh, yeah.
days. And
Yeah, completely.
it did surprise me that they would, for a film that was filmed back in 43. Did you say it was
42 is when it came out.
42?
Yeah.
Yeah, for a film back then to touch on such matters, I was
Mm,
surprised at that. I mean,
yeah.
it's not explicit, but
No.
if you've got more than an ounce of an IQ about you, you'll pick up on it. And I'm thinking, my word, I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah, completely. But I will say that you add that to the moment which I really where I really hated Renault, when it's kind of he's explaining to Laszlo that Ugart is dead and they haven't decided if he was killed while escaping or committed suicide.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oof. And he just says that with such brazen lack of, even caring about that
yeah.
person's life, that I'm just like, you shit.
You get the impression that Renault just sees everyone else as just playthings to be discarded as and when. As
Completely. I
long
mean,
as
he
it,
even says, that
yeah,
line that you said, that my heart is my least vulnerable spot.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, so that kind of deals with the majority of the things that we think about the film and stuff. So, what I'm going to do then, to be a little bit different than you might be used to for the cinema classics, because a lot of these are going to be, classics. Instead of approaching an audience, I thought it would be interesting to look at what critics thought of the movie, either at the time or contemporary. So, instead of an audience interaction, this is going to be the critics' response to Casablanca. I have quite a lot about it, so I have split it between myself and DK so that you don't have to just hear one voice endlessly. And DK, I believe you've got the intro or the first half of the critics' response.
I do, yeah. Yeah, Casablanca received consistently good reviews, as said by Bosley Crowther of the New York Times. He wrote, the Warners have a picture which makes the spine tingle and the heart take a leap. He applauded the combination of sentiment, humour, and pathos with taut melodrama and bristling intrigue. Crowther noted its devious convolutions of the plot and praised the screenplay quality as one of the best and the cast performances all of the first order. The trade paper Variety commended the film's combination of fine performances, engrossing story, and neat direction, and the variety of moods, action, suspense, comedy, and drama that makes Casablanca an A1 entry at the box office. The review observed that the film is splendid anti-Axis propaganda, particularly in as much as the propaganda is strictly a byproduct of the principal action and contributes to it instead of getting in the way. Variety also applauded the performances of Bergman and Henreid and noted Bogart, as might be expected, is more at ease as the bitter and cynical operator of a joint than as a lover, but handles both assignments with superb finesse. Some reviews were less enthusiastic. The New Yorker rated Casablanca only pretty tolerable and said it was not quite up to Across the Pacific, Bogart's last spy fest. In the decade since its release, the film has grown in reputation. Murray Burnett called it true yesterday, true today, true tomorrow. By 1955, the film had brought in $6.8 million, making the third most successful of Warner's wartime movies behind Shannon, Harvest Moon, and This Is the Army. On April the 21st, 1957, the Brattle Theatre of Cambridge, Massachusetts, showed the film as part of a season of old movies. It proved so popular that a tradition began in which Casablanca would be screened during the week of final exams at Harvard University. Is that still going on, Mike? Do you know?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
Oh, wow. Todd Gitlin, a professor of sociology who had attended one of these screenings, has said that the experience was the acting out of my own personal rite of passage. The tradition helped the film remain popular, while other films that had been famous in the 1940s have faded from popular memory. By 1977, Casablanca had become the most frequently broadcast film on American television. On the film's 50th anniversary, the Los Angeles Times called Casablanca's great strength the purity of its golden age Hollywoodness and the enduring craftsmanship of its resonantly hokey dialogue. Bob Strauss wrote in the newspaper that the film achieved a near-perfect entertainment balance of comedy, romance, and suspense. Roger Ebert wrote of Casablanca in 1992, "There are greater movies, more profound movies, movies of greater artistic vision or artistic originality or political significance, but it is one of the movies we treasure the most. This is a movie that has transcended the ordinary categories. In his opinion, the film is popular because the people in it are all so good, and it is a wonderful gem." Ebert said that he had never heard of a negative review of the film, even though individual elements can be criticized, citing unrealistic special effects and the stiff character of Laszlo as portrayed by Paul Henreid. I've just got to say, I disagree with both of those, but, you know, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I have, mate.
Cool. Critic and film historian Leonard Maltin considers Casablanca the best Hollywood movie of all time. On the review aggregator site Rotten Tomatoes, 99% of 127 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 9.4 out of 10. The website's consensus reads, "An undisputed masterpiece and perhaps Hollywood's quintessential statement on love and romance, Casablanca has only improved with age, boasting career-defining performances from Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman." On Metacritic, the film has a perfect score of 100 out of 100, based on 18 critics, indicating universal acclaim. It's one of the few films in the site's history to ever achieve a perfect aggregate score. In 1989, the film was one of the first 25 films selected for preservation in the US National Film Registry as being deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. In 2005, it was named one of the 100 greatest films of the last 80 years by Time magazine. The films that were selected were not ranked. Bright Lights Film Journal stated in 2007, "It's one of those rare films from Hollywood's golden age which has managed to transcend its era to entertain generations of moviegoers. Casablanca provides 21st century Americans with an oasis of hope in a desert of arbitrary cruelty and senseless violence." The film also ranked at number 28 on Empire's list of the 100 greatest movies of all time, which said, "Love, honor, thrills, wisecracks, and a hit tune are among the attractions, which also include a perfect supporting cast of villains, sneaks, thieves, refugees, and bar staff. But it's Bogart and Bergman's show, entering immortality as screen lovers reunited only to part. The irrefutable proof that great movies are accidents." Screenwriting teacher Robert McKee maintains that the script is the greatest screenplay of all time. In 2006, the Writers Guild of America West agreed, voting it the best ever in its list of the 101 greatest screenplays. So, yeah, fair to say it's popular. I would say, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else we can really add to that. Like I said, this is the reason I didn't really feel the need to add an audience response, because, as you can see, there's always going to be one or two little dissenting voices, but the majority of that's overwhelmingly positive. So, yeah, any of the last thoughts before we go into our favourite things and the conclusion and score then, DK?
No, I think I think you picked a really great one to start this spin-off with, mate.
Cool. Awesome. Well, you know, out of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, we're going to walk into our usual segment, which is the favourite character, moment, and line. So I'm going to come to you first and ask DK, who was your favourite character in the movie and why?
It's a tough one, this. I almost gave it away earlier. It's a toss-up between Sam and Rick. And I think I'm going to have to go with Rick, just because it's predictable, and everybody would say this, but he's I guess the character I most identify with, and I will explain that a little more when we get to our favourite line.
Okay, cool. I'd love to say I identify with Rick, but again, I'd probably beat Ugart. No, I wouldn't kill anybody. I'd be the unlucky guy that Rick has to help, get some money together for his goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite character was also Rick. I just said it's a brilliant portrayal of a complex and yet relatable character who has a real narrative arc, a rich history, and ultimately an admirable nobility and honor. So yeah, same. So yeah, do you have a favorite moment or scene or anything from the movie that you can shout out?
I have two, and they've both been mentioned.
Probably the same two as me.
The first one is the La Marseillaise.
Yeah.
And the second one is, I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here. You're winning, sir. Oh, thank you very much.
Fair enough. My favorite moment was almost the Duel of the Anthems, but I think the ending is just so legendary and so justifiably so. And I was I was like, rock concert style mouthing the lines along with the ending this time when it came up because it's so important to me and so impactful. And it was just, I just love it. I think it's, like I said, it's the best ending of any film ever. And I will fight anyone that thinks otherwise. So what's your favorite line in the movie then?
It's this is probably, and you know me, Mike. So yes, this is probably what makes me identify with Rick the most, and it's the one where they're sat down and they're questioning Rick.
Make it official if you like.
What is your nationality?
I'm a drunkard.
So that means Rick is a citizen of the world. Yep. That is pretty cool. I like that whole sequence actually when he's I was born in New York, if that helps, or whatever he said.
Yeah, this is what I mean. I know people, as we've just read in the audience responses, they say the dialogue is hokey, but I just love it.
Yeah, completely. Speaking of which, my favorite line is just the whole last speech.
Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. You're part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of your life.
But what about us?
We'll always have Paris. We didn't have. We lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Ilsa, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. He's looking at you, kid.
And it's performed, I should say, by Bogart just incredibly well. So yeah, that would be mine. So that's everything other than our conclusions and our score out of 5 stars, as we always do. So do you want to go first with this one, DK, as the kind of co-host of this one?
I don't know whether to let you go for... No.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Okay. Again, as I always say, this is written down, so sorry if it sounds a little bit like I'm reading, but I have to get my thoughts clear. I just said, it's always kind of annoying when people say you should watch something because it's a bona fide classic. That said, everyone should watch this. It's a bona fide classic. Whatever its troubled gestation was, it birthed an absolute treasure. Sparkling dialogue that's become iconic, outstanding performances, a heartfelt and powerful story encompassing real-world events and the relatable business of love. The film has a reputation as possibly the great romance story, and I think it's well earned. The acting, script, and direction form a palpable sense of romantic longing and make a painfully believable tragic love story. But the pièce de résistance, pun intended, is the flipping of that into an ending as beautiful, intense, and powerful as it is unexpected. The hero doesn't get the girl, but gets to be truly elevated to almost mythic hero status. It's a selfless goodness that we can all aspire to, whether or not we can say we do the same. And it truly resonates with the established relationship because real love isn't selfish. I could talk about this for hours. I could analyze the historical context, talk about the movie's important ruminations on good versus evil, and so much more. But instead, I'll just say the only final word that matters on this and give my score of 5 out of 5. So, yeah. Over to you, DK.
Yeah, I am ashamed to admit it, but until this week, I'd never seen it. Like everyone, I've seen clips here and there, and the movie's most famous quotes are ubiquitous whenever Hollywood classics are mentioned. But it was so in your face as a cinematic masterpiece. I'd written it off before even seeing it. As you say, Mike, when someone tells you to watch something because it's a classic, the hipster in me automatically balks. But I've got to say, I was wrong. This is gold. The direction and cinematography is fantastic. The performance is spot on, and the dialogue, as I said earlier, to me anyway, maybe I'm hokey myself, but it sparkles. I was gripped from the opening moments and couldn't stop until the end flashed up on screen. One thing I was not prepared for was the atmosphere and feeling of desperation in the inhabitants of Casablanca. And with all that's going on in the world right now, it's just a little too close to the surface. That atmosphere is something that all those clips and quotes did not prepare me for. And honestly, it blew me away. It might be listed as a classic, but its reputation is well deserved. And that's why on this very first episode of this classic show, it's going to be a 5 from me too.
Woo, yes! Fantastic. This is making Casablanca only the third film so far at time of recording to have achieved a perfect score of 5 out of 5 stars as an average, which was not difficult for me to work out. And I'm thrilled to hear it because I really do love this movie, and I hope that this maybe prompts more people to see it because, like I said, it's sad for me to have learned that it seems to be fading out. There's a lot of people that I spoke to of our generation that haven't seen it, and so I can only assume a lot of younger people haven't as well. So yeah,
I'll be honest. I'll be honest, mate. I after watching this, I've ordered a physical copy.
Oh yes.
So that's why I wanted you to go first, because I knew what your score was going to be. So I thought, no, I'm going to give him a surprise.
I've made no secret of my love of this movie. Like I said, I own it currently on 2 Blu-ray discs and 2 4K discs and a DVD. So, yeah.
Oh, God. And Mike's opinion was, this bastard likes Buckaroo Banzai. It's going to be a 2 if we're lucky.
I just hope that the other cult cinema classics, I should say, go down as well. And I'm thrilled to have had a chance to talk about Casablanca and hopefully introduce it to some people if they listen to this as well, and to share it with you if it was the first time you'd seen it, and maybe give you a new favorite film or a new one to put in your top 10, 20, whatever it is. So yeah, which out of curiosity, which version did you order physically?
It's the Blu-ray, because I don't have to. I mean, we've got a 4K TV, but I don't have a 4K player. So, yeah, cool. It's still just the Blu-ray, but
that's still fine.
The 4K has such a nice cover, though. I am tempted just for future.
I mean, the 4K Steelbook set is fantastic, I will say, and does include a Blu-ray as well.
Oh God, I'm going to selling myself on street corners just to afford my physical media habit. Thanks to you.
I will say that's how I have so many copies of the film, because
because you're selling yourself?
No, the Warner Brothers Classics collection also has it on 4K and Blu-ray inside of the box set. So,
right.
Yeah. Hence why I've owned it in 5 different discs across 3 different places. So, but yeah, I mean, that Steelbook set is it's gorgeous. And the extra Blu-ray really looks intriguing because it has, like I said, the history of Warner Brothers, which I really should watch at some point. Even though there are times when I kind of wish it didn't have a history at present, but no mind. So,
oh God, yeah. How far have they fallen?
Well, I mean, judging by the controversy about the Academy Awards in '44, they've always been more or less the same. They've gone from one terrible owner to another, it sounds like. Yeah. Anyway, so out of curiosity, how much was the Blu-ray that you bought?
The Blu-ray was only $7.99, but the 4K was only $16. So I'm tempted to give the Blu-ray to a friend and maybe get the 4K. If I'm
look
being
for
honest.
The 3-disc Steelbook set. Honestly, it's worth it.
All right.
I think it's about 30, but I thoroughly recommend it because, like I said, the art card, the reproduction, and the Steelbook case. When you see the steel cover, is just something else. Anyway,
I'll have a look at that when we leave.
I can take a picture of it anytime and send it to you if you want.
Yeah, all right.
So yeah, awesome. Right, well, that's going to conclude our first of these cinema classic sort of deep dives. Hopefully you've all enjoyed it, and like I said, maybe I've introduced a new film to you. Maybe I've just reinforced your opinion of Casablanca, and I'm very, very pleased to have said that we started off with a bang with a perfect score. So yeah, thank you so much to DK for agreeing to be the one person that joined me in this intro.
It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
It has. It's been fantastic. It's always good talking films with you, and especially when it's a film that we adore. So, yeah, I'm not. Our schedule's kind of all over the place, so I'm not sure what's coming next in terms of whether it's a cult classic or a silver screen podcast. But I will say, if this does well enough, and I'm hoping it will because I've got plans, the next cinema classic that we're going to be looking at will be the film Rebel Without a Cause. So if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to let us know, or let us know if there's anything you want to see covered. You can always reach us via the various social media links in the episode description. Please also think about contributing to our Buy Me a Coffee at the Ko-fi link, just to help keep the podcast running, keep the lights on. It's not fantastically easy or cheap running this thing. I mean, we do it because we love it, not because it's easy. We do it because we thought it was easy, as DK always says. So, yeah. If you have anything at all you can contribute, I understand it's not necessarily always the case and times are hard, but if you can contribute anything at all, even just a few quid, that would be very appreciated. And other than that, just remains for me to say again, thanks to you, DK. Any last words?
No, just have enjoyed it, and if you out there enjoyed it, please stick around. Mike's got some really, really good episodes lined up.
And again, yeah, stay tuned for the regular Silver Screen podcast and the Cult Classics, because they also have some fantastic things coming up if we do say so ourselves. So yeah, hopefully you can join us as our channel grows and goes from strength to strength. And in the meantime, hey, remember, here's looking at you, kid.
You've been listening to the Silver Screen Podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Additional material and behind-the-scenes sections by DK. Follow us on social media. Links to all of our social media pages can be found via the Linktree page listed in the episode's description. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcast Network. You can listen to this and our sister podcasts on all good podcast providers by searching for Silver Screen Podcast or Mike's Podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share far and wide. Thank you for joining us. Come back next time for more movie magic, and hopefully this can be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.